Hey guys, Jim here from the Intrepid Sea, Air, and Space Museum, coming at you live from the heart of New York City in Midtown Manhattan. This is another Intrepid Adventures live and free program. So, if the emphasis on the free, and if you'd like to keep that free program flowing, please think about supporting us by clicking the link in the chat or in the description. Now, I know what you some may be saying is, where have you guys been for a while? Well, we've had a couple of recorded episodes, but we're back live with you now. So fear not, okay? We got a good one for you today. It's called Jobs on Deck. We'll be taking a look at some of the Intrepid's long history, specifically some of the things the men on board had to do, okay? But at first, let's do a little reminder, okay? That that, let me do it this way, is the Intrepid, okay, the museum as she looks today, okay? By the way, feel free to use the chat feature, guys. We're always very curious about where you guys are tuning in from. Let us know if you've ever been to this place called the Intrepid, okay? And if you had a great time there, I'm sure you've had a great time there. But one thing I want you to specifically tell me in the chat is, do you um, know what kind of a ship this is? Okay, or was, kind of still is. Let's see, it's pretty big. If you know what kind of a ship it used to be, kind of still is, just put it down there in the chat. Let's see, it's got a big flat top. It's got a big structure on the deck there. Let's see, it's probably the flat top, probably has some important purpose. It definitely was a warship. I'm giving you 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Eh. So if you guys were thinking that it maybe was an aircraft carrier, first of all, warship would have been correct, but aircraft carrier is the specific type of warship that it was, okay? And in fact, it was a aircraft carrier way before it was a museum, okay? And that may, by the way, give you some hints as to what kind of jobs were being done on board, okay? Yeah, there we go. A couple of correct answers in the chat there. Very good, guys. Here's a picture from way back when it was commissioned. Now, the Intrepid was commissioned back in 1943. So it served in the latter half of World War II. It continued to serve through the Cold War and all the symptoms of that Cold War, I like to call them symptoms, such as the space race and the Vietnam War as well, before being decommissioned in 1974. It became a museum, like you've probably been to see it today, in 1982. Now, if that number sounds familiar, it's because next year in 2022, we will be celebrating our 40th year in service as a museum. Okay, we have a lot of good celebrations planned, so next year would be a good year to start making your plans to come and see us. Okay. Now, it was a very, very big ship. In fact, if you ask the Intrepid to do a headstand on its bow, it will raise 913 feet into the air as she stands today. In World War II, she was a little shorter, 845 feet. But 913 feet, yeah, that's pretty big. That's about as tall as a lot of the buildings that she's right next to in Manhattan. Okay. As she sits right there on the water, that's going to be that is about, let me go back to the picture. That's about 8 stories tall right there, okay? Now we know she was an aircraft carrier. Why have an aircraft carrier, okay? Well, you can look at an aircraft carrier like Intrepid, and specifically this picture will give you a hint as to why you needed an aircraft carrier. Well, what are those things on the top there? Well, those are probably, well, you see some people in there. You see some little people in there if you follow my cursor. Some of the sailors on board. But some of the bigger things here, those are, of course, aircraft being carried by the aircraft carrier. All right. So one of the most important ways of looking at aircraft carriers is as a floating airport, especially back in World War II, when the technology didn't really exist yet. When the United States entered the war to fly all of our warplanes from the United States over to Europe or to Southeast Asia, so you had to have a medium by which they were delivered there, and that was aircraft carriers. Okay. So the most important reason is a floating airport. You can look at the Intrepid as a floating airport, okay? Someplace for those planes to land. Now, how many aircraft were on board, do you think? Well, I haven't sit there and carried these and counted these aircraft just yet, and I don't expect you to do it either. But if you have a guess on how many aircraft, it looks like a lot of them were on board during its service time in World War II and in the Vietnam War, because there were two different types of aircraft there. Just tell us in the chat. What do you think if you have a guess? Throw down a guess there. Um, Here's a hint: more than one, less than 1,000. Okay, somewhere in between there. There were more in service in World War II than there were in Vietnam. In Vietnam, the planes were generally heavier. They were certainly faster. Maybe took up a little bit more space too, as well. Aha! Okay, so Shampa, welcome to the chat. And we have a guess there of 100 aircraft. That's pretty good. So in World War II, there were between 80 and 100 aircraft on board, depending upon what type and what the mission was that the Intrepid was about to enter into. So excellent guess. By the time of the Vietnam War in the 60s, that was down to about 60 or so aircraft. But a wide variety of types: helicopters, jet aircraft, big prop aircraft, search and rescue aircraft, as well as submarine spotting aircraft and radar aircraft as well. Okay. All right. Let's talk about some of the jobs that these guys had to perform when they were on board. Okay. Now, another way of looking at an aircraft carrier is as a city at sea. So I want you guys to take a few seconds and just think about some of the things you see in your neighborhood every day, okay? And just share with us in the chat some of the things that you think you see every day that might have been on a ship like the Intrepid aircraft carrier. Certainly aircraft carriers today, which are much bigger and frankly more comfortable for the crew on board. But and when I say think about some of the things you're seeing every day as you're walking through your neighborhood, I'm not talking about trees and grass. Okay, you're not likely to find trees and grass on the Intrepid. Birds, you might find some birds using it as their airport as well, or a little layover on their flight going somewhere else. You certainly did see that happen. But I'm talking more like buildings. Okay. So I'll give you a few more seconds to just throw down there in the chat some of the things that you see every day in your neighborhood that you think were also on board the Intrepid. Remember, a lot of men on board. They had to do a lot of things that you and I do every day. And their life had to be as good as possible. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And okay, some of the guesses I'm sure that will be coming, but I do want to show you this picture here. Okay, take a look at that. This is our chair exhibit. Now you might be saying, chairs? Ah, Wolf Watch. Yeah, Jim. There absolutely were areas that the sailors on board could work out. And that's one that I generally don't hear very often. So good on you for that guess. But take a look at our chair exhibit. And I might be thinking, chairs, what's so exciting about chairs? You can actually learn a lot about both the jobs that the crew did on board and uh, life on board. Exactly, what was the everyday life of a sailor, a member of the crew on board, by looking at these chairs. So take a good look at these chairs here. And if you will, pardon me, kind of take a look at the chair that you think might be the most boring chair. Okay, it's the most boring. Maybe it was the most everyday looking, non-exciting chair. Okay. If you guessed that chair right there on the far right, well, that's the one that we get most often about most boring. Okay, it absolutely was the most numerous kind of chair, the most common type of chair on board Intrepid. Okay, and where might you be able to find the most common chair like this? Okay, it kind of sort of looks like an office chair. Keep in mind, these are older artifacts, so office chairs today are much more comfortable and better for you for your body, for your spine. But this could be found in offices back then in the 60s, and offices are some of the things you pass on your way to and from school or work where you're going, right? We had offices on Intrepid. We had clerks that were filing paperwork, typing up orders and records, and doing a lot of filing, a lot of communications work. You might find a chair like that being used by them. You might find it in other places like the sick bay, the hospital. Okay, another place that might be in your neighborhood. the hospital on board called the sick bay, where they took care of the sick and injured guys. And who might you find working there? Doctors, of course, doctors and medical technicians, and you might find some of the guys, maybe some of the technicians using those chairs. You might find some of the guys waiting online to see the medical technicians, or the doctors sitting in that chair as well. Okay, very good. Okay, the most comfortable chair. What do you think the most comfortable chair in our chair exhibit is? Okay. Um, Wherever you find comfortable chairs, probably going to be used by some of the most important people on board. Now, the crew, of course, was very important, but these chairs, these two chairs that you see in our exhibit, might be used by some of the most important people on board the Intrepid. If you think that these two chairs right there were the most important chairs, you absolutely got that correct, okay? And where were these chairs? These chairs were in the pilot's ready room, okay? Look at these pilots here, a job that you'll find on Intrepid, okay? But not all aviators were pilots, because you had navigators as well, radio men, and gunners. And we'll talk a little bit about more crews of aircraft coming up in a little bit. But I want you to take a look at this pilot ready room picture. Now, this is more a picture from the 40s, okay, during World War II. And what was going on in this picture, okay? They look like they're sitting down in these comfortable chairs. And by the way, kind of the first guy there on the left in the front row, his hand is kind of down by where there's a drawer. So they can put their personal items in that drawer there as well. You can see a lot of stuff hanging on the walls, because these guys were the officers, okay? They were the higher ranks, and they needed the comfortable chairs, right? Also, because they're dressed in heavy equipment, you can see them with their flotation vests on, their their canvas helmets on, their goggles, okay, chin strap with the radio attachment on. So if you think they're getting ready to go on a mission, you'd be absolutely correct. So what they're doing here is they're briefing for a meeting. In other words, the commander of these guys will be up in front of the room and telling them about the mission they're about to go on. And oftentimes after a mission as well, they jump out of their cockpits and go back down to the ready room, so that they could be debriefed about their mission, to discuss what went wrong and what went right during their mission. Okay, so they'd often have a lot of heavy equipment, so they need to have some comfortable seats. Okay, very, very good. Okay, let's go back to our chairs exhibit here. What chair do you think looks strange, or maybe the scariest chair? Any guesses? I can certainly see one right now, but it may conflict. It depends. If you're like me, there could be another chair that looks a little bit scary. We'll talk about that after. But what chair do you think is the most scary? And what do you think that chair was used for? I'll give you a few seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 1/2. And time is up. So if you guys were thinking that that chair right there would be the scariest chair, a lot of people agree, and that would be a good choice too. And if you were thinking that that is an ejection chair or an ejection seat, you're correct again. Okay, used by the pilots on board. I want you to imagine for a second, if you will, you are a pilot or an aviator on board a jet aircraft. Let's talk about the Vietnam War. And perhaps you are under fire from the enemy and you can't control your plane anymore. So what you're going to do, and let me see if I can quick zoom in here to get a little closer look. Yeah, so what you are going to do is pull up on this yellow and black striped handle, or pull down on this yellow and black striped handle, and that's going to ignite a 2-stage rocket on the back of your chair, right? And that's going to make you do this. Yeah, you're going to go rocketing out of that cockpit to safety. Okay. Now look at all the debris that's under this guy. Just as a quick side note, when you pull those handles, there's supposed to be a explosive charge that blows away the glass canopy out of your way. But sometimes that doesn't happen. So if that doesn't happen, guess what? You're going right through that glass canopy right there. And you'll notice the pilot is still in his seat. He's up in the front there, and that's probably the gunner ejecting. Okay, they call it punching out. Very, very exciting. for these guys. Okay, so that is the ejection seat. Let's go back to our chairs for a couple of final looks at jobs and life on board Intrepid. What's this chair all about here? Let's see. There you go. All the way on the end on the far left. That's kind of a weird looking seat there. Maybe it's got a little compartment there underneath. Does it look like a seat? Kind of does. Not very comfortable. Anybody have an idea what you think that seat may be all about? I'll give you a couple of seconds to put it down there in the chat. So yeah, Wolf Watch, the yellow the yellow one is for an evil dentist. Yeah, we're going to get to that. That's our next chair we're going to be talking about. Not an evil dentist, but we're going to be talking about that chair. But if you were thinking that that chair might be called something, the Highline chair, you are absolutely correct. It does look like a bird cage, very good, but it's something for you to hold on to, and that makes you think that someone's probably in there sitting down on there. Remember, we talked about the ejection seat, and you go flying out of the cockpit, and you come down, most likely over water, right? I mean, the Intrepid was serving at sea, so most likely you come down over water. You have to be picked up by something. In World War II, a smaller ship like a destroyer or a destroyer escort would come along and throw down a rope ladder for you to climb up. Or in the Vietnam War, in the Cold War, you'd have a search and rescue helicopter that would take off from the deck of the Intrepid and either lower down a harness or a basket for you to crawl in, or would land nearby for you to just jump in, and divers would help you and bring you back to the Intrepid. But let's talk about World War II, when you had to get from your destroyer now back home to the Intrepid. The Intrepid would signal the destroyer to come alongside, and the crew on the destroyer would fire over using modified shotguns. Yep, that's right. These cables would be fired over from the deck of from the destroyer to the Intrepid. They'd be fastened to the deck of the Intrepid, and the Intrepid would in turn zip over the Highline chair right there, okay, that you're seeing. And that is where the crew on the destroyer would grab that chair and put the downed aviator in that seat so they could be zipped back to the Intrepid. Oh, but not so fast. Now we've already talked about how the Intrepid is a city at sea, and since it was a very big ship, it's got all these different things in it, like all this great food, specifically ice cream, right? One of the things you might be passing every day on your way to and from wherever you're going is an ice cream shop, right? A frozen yogurt place, certainly restaurants. Here on Intrepid, there were two, not one, two ice cream parlors, but you don't have anything like that on the destroyer. So um, the crew on the destroyer, kind of feeling a little left out, would say, but wait a minute, Intrepid, before we give your pilot back to you, we want some of that great ice cream. So before you zip over that Highline chair, take a bunch of that ice cream, put it into that bucket there under the seat, zip it on over to us, and we'll be sure to get your pilot back to you. So the crew on Intrepid, being used to doing this and these requests, they would do so and zip it on over to the destroyer. But again, not so fast. Before that pilot gets zipped back, they're going to have the pilot try a little bit of that ice cream, because just in case, and I said that the Intrepid crew of the ice cream parlor staff um, used to being held hostage like this, they just want to make sure they didn't do things like shave soap chips into the ice cream, maybe put a little hot sauce there in the ice cream, right? So they want to have the pilot test it. And if he could give the thumbs up, or at least pretend like it tastes good, in he goes to that Highline seat, and away he goes over to the Intrepid, like you're seeing here. Zip over from the destroyer onto the Intrepid. Okay, he's about halfway there. Now keep in mind, both ships are going full speed, which is about 37, 38 miles an hour in the waves, which could be choppy seas. So this might look like fun, but keep in mind, you may be dipped into the ocean on accident, or on purpose even, at least once before you go back home to the Intrepid. But don't worry, it's better than going down in a fiery crash, okay, to get a little wet. All right, very good. All right, guys, this last chair here, and Wolf Watch, you kind of jumped ahead a little bit. No worries, though. That's something that I would kind of be equally as scared of as the ejection seat. Not a big fan of the dentist, although I totally know you have to go there. That is, of course, our dentist chair. and we had 2 dentists on board to take care of all the guys, the thousands of guys on board. They're going to be there for 6 to 9 months in World War II. 6 months, 6-month tours, they called them during Vietnam. So you have to go to the dentist at least every 6 months, more if you have a problem. So they needed a place to do that. So it would be the dentist is what is exactly what was needed in that case. If you're thinking that chair looks a little bit like another kind of chair, check out this job on board. You're going to be on board for 6 months, 9 months. Your hair is going to grow. You got to keep your hair within naval regulation. Okay, you can't let it get too long or wild. So you need barbers on board. So there was a barber shop on board, so they needed to cut hair as well. All very, very important jobs. And by the way, you may pass a hair salon or a barber shop on your way walking to and fro as well. Okay. Okay, I'm going to take a quick break here, and I do want to see if you guys have any questions. Are there any questions? This is the one I want. Any questions? Okay, how many people served on Intrepid? Okay, very basic question. I'm kind of surprised I didn't say that one or answer that one earlier. So there's a couple of different answers. In World War II, there was about 32 to 3,400 men on board. Okay, yeah, that's a lot. And by the way, the average age was 19 of these guys, 19 years old. So the vast majority was from 17 to 20, working on board this small town. Towns of 3,000 were bigger than a lot of the guys that served on board were from. Okay. By the Cold War, we're talking about 3,200. By Vietnam, about 3,200, 3,000 to 3,200 on board as well. And by the way, those figures did not include the Marines on board. It was about 150 Marines during World War II, about 50 or so Marines by the Vietnam War. Today, no Marines on naval ships. The Navy does it all in-house. I know the Marines are a part of the Navy, although don't let the Marines hear you say that because they don't really think so. All right. Good question. Any other questions? What are the common jobs can you find on Intrepid? Okay, so very good. So let's take that imaginary stroll down your block again and see what you might be seeing, okay? So we've talked about barber shops, hair salons. We've talked about dentists, right? Hospitals. And we've even talked about working in an ice cream shop or a restaurant. What other things that you might see? You might see a post office. You might pass a post office, right? People working in the post office. A city at sea, like all cities on land, have to have a post office. So a very important part of life on board was getting mail from home and sending mail back home. Okay. Remember, this is before text messaging. This is before email, and it's before Facebook. Okay, before TikTok, Snapchat. You know what I'm saying. So we had to do it the old-fashioned way, which is actually take a pen and write on pieces of paper, fold it up, put it in an envelope, put a stamp on it, bring it to the post office on Intrepid, and away it goes. These guys would also get very good things from home, from their family, like cookies, okay, other food and stuff like that, pictures and mementos, just to remind them of home. So post office, what are some of the other things? Back in the day, not so much today. Today, if your shoes kind of wear out, you just go get a new pair of shoes. But back then, you could probably pass a cobbler. Now, cobblers fixed shoes. I remember my parents getting shoes fixed. We had those on board as well. Oh, and by the way, there were shoe polishers as well, a shoe polishing room. Other things. If you are a journalist or like to write or like to play reporter, we had a newsletter on board or a newspaper on board. So you could either write for the newspaper or you could edit that newspaper. Some of the more common jobs on board. Okay. Okay, great job, guys. Thanks for the questions. We'll have some more. Let's see. Back to jobs, all right? Let's take a look at this guy right here, right? Just take a good look at this aircraft. It's one of our most popular. What are some of the things you notice about it? Put it down there in the chat. Wolf Watch, did they have animals on board? No animals on board, at least intentionally. No animals on board Intrepid. We talked a little bit about birds flying to and away Intrepid. That happened, no doubt. Perhaps some mice on board at times, but you know they crawl on board when you pull into a port. But right now, I want you to take a look at that plane and just write in the chat. What do you think's going on with that plane? What are some of the things you notice? What do you think its purpose was? Tell us about the coloring. What do you see in the front there? What do you see in the bottom of it? Talk to me about the wings. It's one of our most popular planes. It is a World War II era aircraft, and it's our only World War II aircraft, by the way. If you, it's got a great name. If you're a fan of comic books and the Marvel movies, especially the Avengers, well, you'll be familiar with Iron Man, Thor, and Hulk. But before we had those guys, we had this. This was our Avenger. Okay, this is the Avenger torpedo bomber. It had one job, and that's to drop that 2,000. That 2,000-pound Mark 13 aerial torpedo that you see down below, and you had only one. Oh, pardon me. You have to drop it on target with an enemy ship. Hopefully, we'll put a big hole in it, maybe even sink that ship. Okay, and again, you had only one, so you have to go back and get another one. But I want you to specifically take a look at the coloring here. Okay, you'll notice three distinct colors. Take a look at the wings. You'll see that they're very dark. Okay, like a dark blue, a navy blue, if you will. And the very top of the body of the Avenger is that color as well. Right under that, you'll see a lighter blue, okay, and that's the middle of the body there. And right underneath the belly, kind of the Avenger, that's the white down there, okay. This is camouflage, right? This is a form of camouflage. Now, what I want you to do is imagine the Avenger flying, okay. This is a type of camouflage called counter shading. And I want you to imagine you're on a ship and you see an Avenger fly overhead. You'll be looking up, you'll see the white of its underbelly, and that will blend in with the sky, especially a cloudy sky. If you can imagine flying in a plane next to the Avenger and you look over and you see the lighter blue, all right, that will help it blend in with a clear sky, the blue of the light blue of the sky. And finally, I want you to picture yourselves flying in a plane way, way up high over an Avenger that's flying closer to the water top. And you'll be looking down, blending in with that water top will be that dark blue, that dark navy blue, okay? That's exactly what we're talking about as far as counter shading. And jobs on board to paint, okay, this aircraft. We'll talk a little bit more about the jobs involved with aircraft in a minute. Well, we're going to do that right now. As a matter of fact, this is a gun turret that's sitting right behind the pilot. The Avenger had a crew of 3. It was the pilot. It was the turret gunner sitting right behind the pilot in this, squished in this, a 50 caliber machine gun firing about 600 rounds per minute, 4 inches from your left ear. You generally have no hearing protection, guys, because back then using hearing protection was considered unmanly, and you didn't want to be made fun of by your crew. So you would rather risk going hard of hearing or flat out deaf. This is true, guys, during war. Okay, so that is your another job that was on board, also considered an aviator, by the way, right? You had a third job in an Avenger, and that's why we're going to show you this kind of blueprint looking diagram here. If you'll notice this back bottom part here, and I'm circling. Let me turn on my laser pointer. Let me see if I can do that for you guys. There you go. You probably see that a little bit better. You see what looks like a gun sticking out there. So this would be the station of the navigator / radio man. And he had a lot of jobs to do: navigating, making sure the pilot's going where he's supposed to go, communicating on the radio with his other 2 crew members, their squadron and their aircraft carrier that they're from. But this particular version of the Avenger had a gun sticking out there. This is generally a 30 caliber machine gun sticking out the back. That would be the navigator's job to fire that too. And by the way, he'd have to be on his belly on the bottom of the Avenger right there to fire that too. Okay, so some of the jobs involved with our Avenger. From the hangar deck, let's hop up to the flight deck and talk a little bit about flight deck operations. Okay, now pay close attention to these guys here. You'll notice they're pretty colorful. And on the flight deck, you will find some of the most colorful daily uniforms, if you will, on the crew. You'll notice the green guys there in the background and the yellow guys wearing the yellow suits, vests, and helmets, okay, into their particular job. We'll talk a little bit more about their particular job in a minute. But let's get into, and these guys are, if they look like they're getting ready to launch that aircraft, you're absolutely right. It looks like an A6 Intruder there behind them, getting ready to launch off of the Intrepid. Let's talk a little bit more in detail about how aircraft were launched. Okay, they were launched using a catapult. Okay, now you may be maybe in school you may have learned about the Middle Ages and how they used these big siege engines called catapults to throw big boulders at a castle wall, trying to break it open so that they could enter the castle. That's at least what I thought of when I first heard of catapults. But what is called a catapult in the Navy used to launch these aircraft. It's really more like a slingshot. Okay, you take a slingshot and maybe you annoy your little brother with it, and you shoot a piece of paper at him or something. Well, that piece of paper translates to the aircraft on board. These aircraft, particularly like the one you're seeing there, bigger, heavier, more powerful jet aircraft, are going to need a lot of help to get off the flight deck. We're going to divide the flight deck into thirds, right? Remember, 845 feet in World War II, 913 feet in the Vietnam War. The first 1/3, it's about 250 feet, is launching operations. That's where the planes are going to launch. That's only 250 feet. That, folks, is not a lot of space to do on their own. So they need the catapult powered by steam to give them this real boost and to basically throw or catapult them off the bow or the front of the Intrepid. So jobs were involved in running the catapult as well. And both the green shirts there and to an extent, the yellow shirts that you were looking at in the previous picture were involved in that. More on them later. But what I want you to do is take a look on the side there, the right side of this picture. You'll see some guys there that thankfully are below that wing, that right wing of that aircraft when it was taking off. What do you think they're doing? What's going on there? Why do you think they need to be so close to a taking off, a launching airplane, right? Let's go to a World War II era picture, and you can get a better look at some of the guys that were nearby. Now you can see some of the guys up front there as well, okay? But look at these guys in the foreground, particularly one of them. Give you a real big hint on what another job was on Intrepid, and a couple over here as well. I'll give you, just throw it down there in the chat if you have any idea. Also, look at all these guys on the deck there. What do you think they're doing? You're seeing a plane that looks like it has just been launched. Any idea what these jobs were? Okay, we've got a couple of answers coming through. Right, the guy has a camera. Photography, guys, another common job. Maybe a hobby of yours, photography. It is of mine, right? The Navy deemed it important, not just the Navy, but all the military, important to take pictures of everything they did, especially the launches of aircraft and landings as well. Everything had still pictures, and when video photography became available, there would be videographers doing that as well. So they would be called photographers' mates. Okay. Over to his kind of right there in the background, a couple of gunners. Okay, another job, anti-aircraft guns to keep the Intrepid safe, especially back in World War II, when the Empire of Japan would send aircraft to attack ships like the Intrepid. So you need anti-aircraft guns as well. Okay, very good, guys. The first 1/3, or sorry, the back 1/3, if you will, of the Intrepid is for landing, and that's also 250 feet, right? You launch aircraft, you eventually have to have some place for those aircraft to land, and that's only the last 250 feet of the flight deck, top of the Intrepid. Often you're going way too fast to stop on your own, so you need a little help as well. But before you even get to the flight deck, you're going to need this guy's help, okay? These guys' help. This is the landing signal officer crew. The guy with the paddles there, he is signaling to the pilot, to the incoming pilot, how he's doing on his approach. Now remember, you're coming in on a very short piece of territory. Okay, it's not very wide either, especially in World War II. You are in the ocean. The Intrepid is probably still going full speed in the waves. How about nighttime? How about on a windy day? Yes, if you're getting the idea, these guys had to know what they were doing and needed these guys to help them. You're absolutely correct. All right. All right, good. Landing signal officer, he'll tell you how you're doing on the approach. You'll see this guy here on the right in the foreground here. He is on the radio. He has a headset, and he's talking to the pilot, and also talking to an area on the flight deck called PRIFLY, Primary Flight Control, which we'll show you later on. And he's coordinating the landings as well. Okay. As we went on in time, as we got to the Cold War and then the Vietnam War, those landing signal officers would have a different job, and their job would be to use the OLS, the Optical Landing System, okay, which you see there on the picture on the left. And this is what the pilot would be seeing. Let me see if I could zoom in there a little bit for you, give you the full screen there. The picture on the right in the red circle, you could see a little red dot, a little bit hard to see, but if you're eagle-eyed, you could see it. And that's kind of the point of view of the pilot, okay? Picture yourself coming in for a landing on the Intrepid there, and you'll be asked by radio to call the ball. And that means, how do you see the red ball called the meatball in that picture there? You see it in the middle, then you're on a good approach. If you see it too high, well, you're too high, okay? If you see it too low, you're too low. So you have to make the adjustment. Okay, so you no longer had to rely on being able to see a guy with paddles, okay? All right, and you'll notice the guy in yellow there as well, okay? Now, I will tell you as a little hint, the LSO, the landing signal officer, and the crew working the optical landing system did wear white, okay? Their shirts and vests and helmets were white. Little clue. You never know when a quiz will pop up. All right. Okay, you get to the landing on the Intrepid now, and again, it's only 250 feet, so you need help. You're going to be helped out by something called a tail hook. Okay, look at the picture on the left, and you can see that landing that tail hook that has been released by the pilot. It's hanging way down there. And look at the picture on the right. You get a better view there of a tail hook. What's that hook going to hook onto? You need something for it to hook onto. If you look again in the left picture, you'll see these wires or cables that are strewn across the flight deck there. So it looks like that hook may grab onto one of those cables. If that's what you're thinking, that's exactly what happens or needed to happen in order for that plane to make a safe landing. Okay, now in World War II, there are about a dozen or so of those cables stretched across the stern. By the time we got to Vietnam, there'd be 5. Today, sometimes there's only 3. So if you're thinking that job is easy, maybe think again, okay? And we need a crew to be in charge of that arrestor gear. If a plane does grab onto that cable, right, like you're seeing here, he makes a successful landing on the right. They need to detach that plane, the tail hook, put it back in place, and move that plane around to where it needs to be to get ready for another plane to land. If he doesn't hook on to that cable, what happens then? Unfortunately, during World War II, it sometimes ended up in crashes with other aircraft that are in the center 1/3 of that flight deck. Now, this, guys, is where aircraft are going to be brought up from the elevators and being prepped for flight to be moved into the first 1/3 of the aircraft carrier. But by the Vietnam War, we had an angled flight deck, so they were landing in a slightly different direction than the other aircraft were taking off. And there was plenty of room to gun that throttle. As soon as those wheels touch the deck, the pilot guns the throttle to full power, because if he does miss that cable, he will not have the speed because he full throttled. He will not have the room because no one should be in front of him now to take off again. Come back around, try that landing again. This is called bolting the landing. Bolting the landing, okay? And guys, if you miss too many cables on your landing, you need more training. So you're going to be sent back for training. Okay. Again, not an easy thing to do. Okay. And they are called an arrested landing. And here you can see a little bit of the hydraulic cable mechanism you can see in the foreground. And you can see a more modern looking aircraft there that has just made a successful arrested landing. All right. Other jobs on the flight deck. So guys, if you're getting the idea that it just wasn't the pilot or the crew of the aircraft to run flight operations, then you are, of course, absolutely correct. They need a whole team. In fact, the team helping them take off and land is much bigger than the crew actually on the aircraft in the vast majority of cases. If you are getting the idea that the flight deck was a dangerous, noisy place to work, absolutely. You might have noticed that along with their helmet, they're also wearing earphones as well. Okay, that's to protect their hearing from the jet blasts. But look in the picture on the lower right-hand corner here, below that kind of cool American flag eagle thing. Down below, you can see beware of jet blasts and rotors. Okay, that'll tell you just how dangerous the flight deck was. Okay, you were always, especially if you weren't paying attention. And it's stressful to constantly be on guard, right? You're always in danger of perhaps walking into a propeller that is going at full speed, walking in behind a jet aircraft that just turns on, and you might get blasted by that jet blast. Okay, very, very dangerous, right? But let's take a good look now at this area here. See with the big 7.5 in the left-hand picture? I'm circling it. It's kind of, people call it a conning tower, a mast. It's similar, but not really correct. If you think of the flight deck as a as the sea, the ocean, what comes out of an ocean? An island. There you go. So that's the name for it. It's called an island. And remember, I was talking about flight. Whoops, sorry about that. We'll get to that. Remember, I was talking about an area called PRIFLY, or primary flight control. That was right here, right? So that's where the air boss, who's in charge of all flight operations on an aircraft carrier, that's where he will be with his staff, making sure everything goes smoothly. He can see from bow to stern the entire flight deck there, right? But let's take a little second here or two and just write down some of the jobs that you think happened inside the flight deck. Sorry, the island. Okay, what do you think happened inside there? I told you one, right? Air traffic controllers, or the naval equivalent, right? The air boss and the staff making sure that air operations went smoothly. But that's only one little corner of the island. What happened in the whole rest of that building there? Give you a few seconds. Throw it over in the chat there, and let me know what are you thinking about the jobs in the island. Probably a lot of them. It's probably vague. It is big. It looks big. You think it looks big. You're correct. A lot of very important jobs there. Why would they have this big building just sticking up out of the flight deck off to the side there, where it could actually be in the way of air operations if they didn't know what they were doing? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 1/2. Time is out. Let's talk a little bit about one section in particular of the island inside. It's called the CIC, or Combat Information Center. Look at these guys here. What do you think they're doing? This looks like some guy here in the foreground. He looks like he's using some kind of a pencil on a screen. They're both using headphones, right? They all have headsets. This guy in the back here looks like he's drawing on some kind of a window or something like that. He has a microphone in his headset. You can see that. So if you're thinking that this was kind of like the nerve center or the brains of an aircraft carrier, you are absolutely correct. Now, Wolf Watch, excuse me, puts down a weather person, that this may be where they're charting some weather. Well, you'd absolutely be correct. It is in the island, in the CIC, where they would keep a sharp eye out on the weather. And one of the more common jobs on board an aircraft carrier, meteorology. They'd have a meteorologist on board, right? It's very important. If you're going to have anything dealing with the air or the sky or the ocean, you need to know what the weather is. So good on you, good job. But these guys are radar operators, okay? You send out radar from those things on top of the island. Just going back there real quick. See, look at the top of the island there. A lot of that is radar equipment. A lot is communications equipment. A lot is radar equipment. And you send it out, and it will reflect off of anything that it hits. A enemy submarine's periscope sticking up out of the water, a ship on the horizon coming to you, a squad of enemy airplanes coming in to attack you as well. And these radar men are trained to read exactly what that is. It's called the radar cross signature, and they'll be able to tell you exactly what it is, and they'll pass it along. Okay, very, very important job in the Combat Information Center. Other things that you'll find in the island is this room right here. This is the navigation room. Yes, navigators, right? Plotting the course for the Intrepid. These guys were so well trained, they can tell you exactly where you are in the world and exactly how to go where you want to go. Okay, the navigation compartment here in the island of the Intrepid. Here's the Navigator Station. This is where the navigator on duty would be. And from this chair here, not that chair, because this is open to the public, you can go and sit in the chair, but he had a much more comfortable chair. He'd look out those windows and he'd be able to see the entire length, the entire starboard or right side of the Intrepid. And he'd be able to see exactly what obstacles, if any, lay ahead, some landmarks, if any, that they needed to see before he could accurately chart his position, right? And you'll notice in front of the chair, is kind of a cylindrical looking device. That is one of the Intrepid's 2 master compasses, right? So he would be proficient in reading that compass. He would have that as a tool there to make sure that he's going, and the Intrepid's going where it needed to go, right? Elsewhere in the island, if you come to the Intrepid, you'll be able to visit this place here, okay? This is the pilot house. This is also an area very, very important. And take a look at what you're seeing in here. Okay, you see gauges, you see windows, you see a wheel of some sort here. If you're thinking perhaps maybe a steering wheel, kind of the name probably gave it away, right? Pilot house. Pilots don't just fly planes. Pilots can also steer ships as part of the Navy vernacular, if you will. So here would be a helmsman, and he would use that exact wheel. That's a authentic wheel that you can come and actually steer when you come visit the Intrepid. So the pilot house would hold the helmsman who's steering, the lee helmsman who's on this device over here, who is communicating with the engine room as to how fast and he wants the engine to go and what direction he wants the propellers on the back of the Intrepid to spin. Okay, so those are all the things that you will find when you go into the pilot house. Okay, so where do you think the captain sits? Or where do you think the captain is? Okay, I jumped too quick. You think the captain's up here? You think the captain's steering the ship? A lot of people make that mistake. Maybe, arguably, the most important job on a ship is the captain. Okay, he's in command of everything. But it's the officer of the deck that is up here in the pilot house running the ship. The captain, and you might think he might have a real comfortable chair somewhere. If that chair looks comfortable, that is where the captain would usually be found. Actually, the nutshell version of that answer, where's the captain, is he can be wherever he wants. He's the captain of the ship, but he's usually over there. In World War II, these glass windows here were not there. It was open to the elements. So in the Southeast Asian field of operations in World War II, where the Intrepid was most likely to be found, he would get a nice South Atlantic breeze, or South Pacific breeze is what I'm trying to say. But if you notice, he has a mirror here, and that is a kind of a side view mirror like you have on your car or your parents' car, right? If you have one. And he could see, he didn't even have to turn and swivel in that chair. He could see what's going on behind him, which is the back end of the flight deck and planes landing. Okay. All very, very important jobs on Intrepid. Okay. Let's pause here, see if we have any more questions. If there are any more questions out there, please let me know. And just put it on up there. Okay. Was one person in charge of steering all the time? Okay. That's kind of a multifaceted question. It depends on what you mean. The helmsman was in charge of steering the Intrepid, but there wasn't just one helmsman. That's probably what you mean. There were several helmsmen, and usually they were among the younger members of the crew. But steering or standing behind a helmsman would be their boss, their supervisor, okay, someone who's training them at almost all times, okay, and the lee helmsman this goes for as well, okay. So all the helmsmen would be in charge of steering the ship, but not just one helmsman. There were several. And standard Navy shifts are 4 hours on, 4 hours off. Okay. So you'd be standing there for not all day, not all 8 hours. It'd be about 4 hours at a time. It could be as few as 2 hours, okay, steering the ship, right? That's the job of a helmsman in the pilot house, okay? Hey, Michael, welcome. Thanks for joining us from Kissimmee, Florida. Do we have another question? Okay. Okay, they're controlling the speed of the Intrepid from there as well, sending messages, a telegraph, if you will, down to the engine room. How fast you want the propellers to spin? Do you want them to spin in what direction? Okay, and so the Intrepid could go 32 knots. You might not be familiar with the term knots. Knots is a measure of speed over water, so of course used by the Navy. It's also, by the way, used in airspeed. So, okay, so it's used by the Air Force as well, and private pilots when they're flying to give their speed, their airspeed, oh, excuse me, in knots. Now, 1 knot is equal to about 1.1 miles per hour. So 32 knots is about 37, 38 miles per hour. I believe I have that math right. So just around 38, 30, 37, 38, 39 miles per hour, something like that. That's our answer, how fast the Intrepid could travel. And by the way, this is back when Intrepid was running on steam power, burning oil, okay, with 4 big screws or propellers. Today, although the aircraft carriers are nuclear powered, they have 2 nuclear fusion reactors running their propellers in the back. They're much bigger, much heavier than the Intrepid was, and they still travel 32 knots. Okay, they have a lot more power, but they're a lot heavier, right? Good question there. Okay, let's see what else we can get to here. Let's go back to our flight deck, other flight deck jobs. Okay, now we were on the hangar deck before, and we saw some planes on the hangar deck, and it's where the planes get stored, get taken out of the elements, right? Where they get fixed up a little bit, but they don't fly from the hangar deck. They don't take off and land from the hangar deck. So they have to be brought up to the flight deck. And how do they do that? Well, you're looking at it right there, okay? Our aircraft elevators, just like people, or you may use an elevator to go from one floor to another in your building or in your place of work. Elevators are used by planes as well, okay? Now, of course, planes can't use stairs like you can use stairs. Thank you, Jiraj, appreciate that. But they use aircraft elevators. And by the way, as a hint, the color of the flight deck personnel, what they're wearing, would be blue. A little hint that are controlling these elevators and dragging the planes, or I say dragging, but they're actually towing them with little scooter type things, motorized, from these doors that you see here on the left side of the photo, from the hangar deck onto the elevator, bringing them up to the flight deck, and then towing them off the elevator. Okay. All right. Very, very good. Other things. Okay. So you're getting the idea that people were pretty colorful, the uniforms that they wore. And this is a great picture. I threw this in there just to kind of illustrate that. Okay. Not all of the jobs are glamorous. Okay. Not all of the jobs are maybe your favorite job that you might want on when you're serving on a carrier. But sometimes jobs, but most jobs just have to be done. Okay. And you are part of a crew. So you have to chip in and do jobs like swabbing the deck. Okay. Um, if you think of all the things that are going on the flight deck, it's pretty busy and it probably can get pretty dirty with all those aircraft flying around. So you got to clean that off. Okay. It could pose a hazard to aircraft that are landing and taking off, swabbing the deck. And here you see a lot of greens, a lot of blue. Well, one blue. You see about 3 or 4 reds, a couple of whites, a lot of browns in there as well. Don't see any yellows, but that's also a color that we know of that flight deck crew will wear as well. Okay. Um, so together, sometime during the 70s, I believe, the term collectively, when talking about all these guys and now women that work on the flight deck as Skittles. Do they still have Skittles? I don't know. They still sell Skittles as the fruit flavored candy, right? I kind of liked them. They were pretty good. So they collectively were to become known as Skittles. Okay, let's get a quick dive back down to the hangar deck to take a look at this picture. I mentioned it very quickly. You'll see a number of jobs going on very quickly before. You see a number of different jobs going on here. I'm not sure if this is a staged photograph or if it's an actual photograph of men working on that Avenger right there. It is an Avenger. You'll see, looks like the covering of the engine is off here in the front. There's a guy poking around in there. There's a guy up on the propeller up here in the front of the aircraft taking a look what's going on in there. A couple of guys assisting down here below. And look at this guy up on the wing. All right, not quite sure what he's up there doing. He could be actually painting a number on the wing again. Maybe it got, maybe it wore off. He could be doing a little adjustment to the outside of the wing there. So another job on board Intrepid is aircraft mechanics, avionics technicians, electrical technicians, all working in the hangar deck as well. Okay. I quickly want to take you guys up to the forward section interior of the Intrepid to a place called the forecastle. Now, the forecastle is a contraction of the word forecastle, and that's what basically the interior sections of most naval ships are still referred to as. Here you'll see the anchor chain room, and that's what we're looking in here right now, the anchor chain room, okay? Here you'll see these two big black chains, which are attached to our two big anchors here on Intrepid. 30 tons, 15 tons each was each of the anchors, so 30 tons in total of anchor on Intrepid, okay? Anchor operation, now this is a staged photo because these guys would be a little bit more appropriately dressed for a dangerous operation, which is dropping anchor, okay? You'll see the guy on the front there, or on the left there, he's holding a rope. He's it's attached to a pin in this clip here. It's called a pelican hook. And a guy here with a sledgehammer, right? And to give you a little more close up here, this is your pelican hook, or sorry, this is your stopper chain here. But here's the pelican hook for another stopper chain that's going out here to the upper left corner. To go back there real quick, the guy with the sledgehammer, or sorry, the guy with the rope will pull out the pin. The guy with the sledgehammer will slam into that clip there, right? That will open this pelican hook, and gravity will simply draw out the 50-ton anchor into the ocean. That's resting on the hull of the outside. Just drop right into the ocean, right? So what do you think about working in this room? Do you think it would be noisy? You think that chain drops out slowly? Or do you think it drops out quickly? If you guess quickly, you guess correct. About 30 miles an hour, that chain is going to drop out. So you need to get away from that chain because it's not going to fall straight either. It's going to waver back and forth. Okay. And of course, it's steel that's grating against steel. So it's going to create a lot of dust. So you're kind of breathing in some stuff too. So it's not a great place. It's going to be noisy. And how'd you like this job, guys? Speaking of the anchor, you got to go up there and scrape the anchor, right? Get the barnacles off. You got to get the rust off. You got to protect it from rust by putting new paint. See the guy on the right here? He's got his can of paint there. He's probably painting it, while the guy here on the left is just scraping off the barnacles. Okay. By the way, these guys are about 60 feet or so up off the waterline. Can't do this job if you have a fear of heights. All right. So that's the anchor right there. So we're back in our anchor chain room, and one of the interesting things you can see, and by the way, you can visit this room. One of the most interesting things to me about this room, take a look at this. That's the Roadrunner, right? That's some sailor art. Not exactly a job on board, but something they could do during their free time. And if you look up in the upper right-hand corner, that's an anchor. That's a Navy SEAL there, the SEAL of the U.S. Navy, that is painted on there as well. You can also see on this hub right here where the anchor goes back, you'll see an old-time American flag as well painted in there. Okay, just some of the jobs you can do up in the forecastle. Guys, we've talked about a ton of jobs here, and as we bring it home for you guys in the last few minutes, the most obvious thing is these guys got to eat. Okay, there could be up to 3,400 men in there. Today's aircraft carriers, 5,500 men and women serving alongside each other on aircraft carriers. You got to feed all these guys. So down on third deck, known as mess deck, is where you'll find these guys eating. Okay, you'll see the crew here eating. Take a look at the background there. These rooms, yes, will be decorated in different themes. There was a Western theme. There was one that was made you feel like you were in a park. There was one that made you think you were sitting in maybe a sidewalk cafe eating. Okay, so this is all part of morale, making these guys feel a little bit more at home. And by the way, it's called mess, the mess deck. That comes from a French word, mez, which means a portion of food. Okay, so the mess deck, you get your portion of food on the mess deck. Okay, someone's got to cook the food, and this is where it is cooked. Okay, so you had cooks and chefs on board Intrepid as well, and aircraft carriers. There were two of these, because you have to feed 3,400 men, or just over 3,000 by the time the Vietnam War came around. Two fully stocked galleys. Okay, so you had to cook for 3,400 men during World War II. And here are some of your cooks. The guy on the left picture, it looks like he's cooking some pork chops. Yummy. It's been a while since I had pork chops, right? The guy on the left, maybe an older photo from maybe World War II. I'm not so sure what he's got there in the bin. That could be some steaks or something like that. If you're getting the idea that these guys ate well, you're correct. Okay, the Navy's famous for having some of the best food in the military. So at least a perk and a cause of high morale in the crew is how well you ate. Okay, now imagine if you're like me, you're imagining some of the smells that you're smelling right about now, and especially if you're hungry, you can probably smell those pork chops or the steak. But if you're like me, you're into bread. Okay, I love my bread. So how about this guy? You had bakers on board as well. And there you go. How about some freshly baked buns? I can smell that right now as we speak. Okay, the baker was he would be my best friend probably. Okay, and by the way, they had to bake bread for 3,400 guys, 700 loaves of bread, 700 loaves of bread. Guys, occasionally the Intrepid would do special jobs and special work, like during the Cold War. They would be the recovery vessel for two space missions, okay, including this one that you're looking at there, the Gemini 3 mission. Now, this happened on March 23rd, 1965. And these guys, Gus Grissom on the left, John Young on the right, they splashed down, and it was the Intrepid's job to go get them. Okay, helicopter picked them up, and the Intrepid picked up their Gemini capsule that you can see in the picture on the right. So these guys at least had some temporary jobs down here, these sailors, right, to help the crew, certainly the pilots of the helicopter, to bring up the capsule, make sure it was safe, make sure it was brought aboard in this case, it was the starboard or right side elevator, right? And what happens, of course, when everything goes smoothly, you have a celebration. So let's bring Gus and John down there and let's bake them a real big cake. The cake is so big, they can't just use a knife. They have to use swords. Okay, so you see Gus in the foreground, John in the background there. And an officer standing in the background whose ceremonial sword they probably are using, one of them, the other one got, of course, from another officer, cutting that cake. Okay, so they celebrate this. Remember, we were still early in the space race, so it was still a very cool, very common, very uncommon thing to see. And everything happened to the letter, so they're going to celebrate it with cakes. Okay, all right. More cakes. Hey guys, here's your first anniversary. So when the Intrepid turned 1 year old, this happened. This cake. Guys, this cake, 700 pounds. Okay. Actually, it was baked in many separate, smaller sections. They had to put it all together. Not quite sure how they do that. Maybe icing? I'm not quite sure. I don't bake cakes. You will want a cake baked by me. But it was so heavy, they had to bring it up on the bomb elevator, the special elevators that they used to bring up the bombs and torpedoes on board the Intrepid to be put on the aircraft. Okay, they brought it up to the hangar deck, and the two cooks here, two bakers, had to put the finishing touches on the top of the cake there. And of course, doing their best to make the top there look like an aircraft carrier for the first anniversary of the Intrepid. Okay. So these guys, how do they get their recipes from printed recipes like this? I want you to check out this recipe, easy chocolate cake. Now, as you might be getting an idea, I'm no baker. And if you're like me, there's no baking that's easy. So I don't know what's so easy about this chocolate cake, especially if you look at the ingredients. Look at the ingredients here on the left. Don't you think, I always thought cakes needed some milk, needed some eggs. No milk, no eggs. So how is it easy? I don't know. This is gonna serve, I believe it's 100, yeah, 100 servings of chocolate cake. Okay, so you multiply that, scale that up by several times, and you'll have cake for the entire crew of the ship. And by the way, I guess since it's no milk and no eggs, it's probably vegan. So there you go. Not sure that was a big concern back then, though, but there you go. Okay, let's see. Have you been studying the colors of, as we take one last look at our first anniversary cake, the colors of the Skittles? Remember the men and women today, women that have jobs on the flight deck? Let's do a little quiz, if you will. Right? Okay, so for this first one here, which color is in charge of, of preparing the aircraft to fly? Okay, is it A or is it B? All right. Now, this guy that prepares the aircraft for flight, he's in charge of a specific plane. He's the last authority on that plane. He's the last one that will salute to the pilot. Pilot will salute him back, and away he goes. If you think it's A, put it down there in chat. You think it's B, put it down there in chat as well. The guy in A is actually more of a brown shirt. Let me give you that little clue there. It looks a little reddish, but it's brown. And of course, the guy's wearing the white shirts on the right. Any guesses, guys? Oh, a couple answers coming in. Shampa says A. Forgive me if I say your name wrong there. If you said A, you are correct. Good job, guys. So guys in brown shirts are plane captains, right, that work up on the flight deck. And their job is just like I said, they are in charge of one specific airplane. Okay, very good. We're off to a good start. So here's another one. Which one of these guys you think is in charge of the refueling? Okay, you think it's the red shirts wearing, or the guys wearing red shirts in A, or is it the guy wearing the purple shirt in B? What do you think? Put it down there in the chat. If you think it's the red shirts in A, the guy wearing the purple shirt in B. I'll give you a hint. The guys that are in charge of refueling, and these guys are also going to be driving the fuel tank trucks around the flight deck and bringing them to the different aircraft. Okay. If you said B, like Shampa did again, you are absolutely correct. Okay. These guys are called grapes, obviously, because they're wearing the purple shirts. Okay. We're doing really good here. A couple of you guys got that correct. Let's go to our next one. So which color here is in charge of the catapults to help the aircraft launch and the arresting gear to help the aircraft land? Okay, and by the way, these guys are also in charge of unloading and loading any cargo that are on aircraft. Not all aircraft are war aircraft. Okay, there's a lot of aircraft bringing in supplies for the crew. If you think it's A, the guys wearing the blue shirts, then put A in the chat. If you think it's B, the guys in the green shirts, then put B in the chat. Take a good look at what they're doing there in the picture, because that's a big hint right there. And of course, we went over this before. So if you were paying attention. Okay, I got one B. I got a couple of Bs. You guys, there's no fooling you guys. If you said B, you're absolutely correct. And it's the green shirts. Okay, Wolf Watch, good job there, buddy. Let's give you one more. Okay, this is our last one. Okay, let's see if we can go 100% here, guys. Which is the aircraft handling officer? Okay, this may be a little bit harder than the others. Okay, these guys are also in charge of telling the aircraft where to go, like where to steer, making sure the aircraft get to where they need to be. For example, these guys will take aircraft that have just been landed and have been disconnected from the arresting gear, and we'll move them forward into the middle of the flight deck where they can be refueled and reloaded with weapons if that's what they're carrying, and then moved further to the front 1/3 so they can be handed over to the green shirts so that they can be attached to the catapults. So if you think it's the A's, the guys in the yellow shirts, put down A in the chat. If you think it's the guys in the white shirts, put down B in the chat. Let's see if we can come up. I'm counting on you guys to keep the the 100% answer rate going. So, oh, I got Wolf Watch saying A, Shampa saying A as well. There is no fooling you guys. 100% A is, of course, the correct answer. Okay, guys. Hey, good job, guys. And guys, that's about it. Thank you so much for joining us today. Is there another question that we could pop up on the screen there? Oh, we have another question. Okay, are the anchors still being used today? That's an excellent question. The answer is no. Today, the Intrepid is moored or tied to the pier in the west side of Manhattan by big, thick ropes, so moorings. And when you come to the Intrepid, because I'm sure you're interested now of coming to the Intrepid now, I'm sure you'll be doing that as well, is checking these things out. But you can see the anchors on the hull, on the front of the ship outside, so you can see those anchors, at least you can see them. And don't forget to check out the anchor chain room as well. Okay, so no, they're not used today. But they were actually used, but rarely so, when the Intrepid was in service. Okay, you much prefer to go to a port, but the Intrepid being so big, maybe the port doesn't have the facilities to handle such a big ship, so you got to anchor, drop your anchor off port, and then ferry crew back and forth, or whatever you need, cargo, dignitaries by boat, okay, by launches. Let's do one final question. I have such a great time with you guys. Let's do that one final question. I knew we would have one. How long were the chains? Okay, excellent question. Okay, so if we're talking in World War II, both the chains would be about 950 feet long. That's pretty long. By the way, with each of the links of the chain weighing about 130 to 150 pounds. There's a couple different types of links, so they'd be pretty heavy. If they looked heavy, they were, right? So 950 feet long. So we had the starboard or right side anchor, the port or left side anchor as well. But when the Intrepid underwent its first refit and renovation in the early 1950s to be more modernized to handle jet aircraft and the like, they also put in a sonar package, right? Sonar is what the guys use to see what's under the water, right? So you could catch enemy submarines, hopefully. After all, that was the new job of the Intrepid, is to become a submarine chaser. They had to move over the port side chain to the middle. So that needed to lengthen the chain. This is my long-winded explanation of telling you that chain in the middle of the ship, where you can see it in the anchor chain room, 1,250 feet, that's pretty long, right? Well, guys, I have to say it was my pleasure bringing you this program today and talking a little bit about the jobs on board. Please make sure you tag us in your social media. Please make sure you join us in Google Arts and Culture, where you can take a virtual tour of the Intrepid before you come, or even get the things that you might have missed after you come. Okay, guys, I hope you're having the best of holiday seasons. This is our last program of the year, so Happy New Year to you. We will see you in 2022. This, unfortunately, will be my last program for a while at least, but don't worry, we'll still have these programs coming at you with Alicia and possibly another member of the crew live from the Intrepid. So we're not done yet. But guys, thank you so much for your patronage over the years. And we'll see you in 2022. Take care.